All right, let's dive into one of the biggest mysteries in all of medicine, the placebo effect. This is a story that's all about the incredible, hidden power your own mind has to heal your body. Okay, so let's just get right to the big question, right? Can a sugar pill, something with literally zero medicine in it, actually stop real physical pain? It sounds totally impossible, but the answer is a definite yes. For hundreds of years, this has been a huge puzzle for doctors. A patient gets a treatment they believe is going to work, and they start to feel better, even when that treatment is, well, a total fake. So, how on earth does that happen? To figure it out, we've got to go back in time and look for the very first clues. So, our story actually starts way back in the 18th century. Now, this is long before we had things like brain scans or modern clinical trials. But even then, some really sharp doctors were starting to notice something interesting. They were realizing that a patient's own mind played a huge role in whether they got better. And you know what? The word itself gives us a pretty big hint. Placebo pops up in medical books for the first time in the late 1700s, and it comes straight from Latin, meaning I shall please. It was basically used to describe a simple, harmless remedy, given more to make a patient happy than to, actually do anything medically. So during this time, you had doctors like William Cullen, who were already kind of onto this. They'd prescribed really mild treatments because they recognized that sometimes just the power of belief was enough. But the real game changer? That came in 1799 with a groundbreaking experiment by a guy named Dr. John Haygarth. Okay, so at the time, there was this super popular and super expensive pain remedy called Perkins tractors. They were these special metal rods, and the idea was you'd apply them to a sore spot, and they would just draw the pain right out. They were a huge deal. Well, Dr. Haygarth was, let's just say, a little skeptical. So he came up with this brilliant test. He treated one group of patients with the real pricey metal tractors, but for another group, he used fake tractors made of plain old wood that looked exactly the same. And the result? Get this. Patients said they felt way better after using both. It didn't matter if it was the expensive metal or the cheap wood. And this just laid it all out there crystal clear. The big takeaway was that the act of being treated, the whole ritual of it, and the patient's belief that it would work, while those were incredibly powerful forces all by themselves. Okay, now we're going to fast forward about 150 years. We're jumping from the 18th century right into the middle of the battlefields of World War II. This is where the placebo effect showed up in a really dramatic, high-stakes way. So, the person we need to know about here is an American physician, Dr. Henry Beecher. Picture this. He's in a field hospital, surrounded by terribly wounded soldiers, and he is suddenly facing a massive crisis. The soldiers are in absolute agony, but the hospital's supply of morphine, the strongest painkiller they had, is gone. It runs out. So in this moment of pure desperation, Beecher tells a nurse to inject the wounded soldiers with a simple saltwater solution, but to tell them it's morphine. And to his total shock, a huge number of them reported that their pain was getting significantly better. That experience on the battlefield was so powerful, it stuck with him for years. And then, in 1955, he published a paper that was going to change modern medicine. His landmark study was called The Powerful Placebo, and it basically took this phenomenon out of the category of weird story and put it right on the map as clinically important. He proved to the entire scientific community that the brain's role in our physical health had to be taken seriously. So we've seen the history, right? But that still leaves the biggest question of all. How does this stuff actually work? And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the modern science that finally shows us the biology behind the belief. Because this is the question you always hear, right? When people talk about placebos, they say, oh, so is it fake? Are people just making it up? Is it all just in your head? And the answer, thanks to modern neuroscience, is a hard no. It's not just in your head like it's imaginary. It is quite literally in your brain. And there's a huge difference between fantasy and actual biology. Okay, so this is the crucial part. This isn't imagination, it's physiology. When you take a placebo that you believe in, that expectation of relief can actually trigger your brain to release its own natural painkillers, chemicals like endorphins. It also pumps out dopamine, which is tied to reward and motivation. We can actually see inflammation go down, and we can watch on brain scans as the activity in the brain's pain centers quiets down. This is a real biological thing happening. And this really reveals the secret, doesn't it? The magic isn't in the sugar pill or the saltwater shot. The power is in the process, the whole context and ritual that happens around the treatment. We can actually break that whole process down into a few key parts. A huge slice of it is just the patient's own expectation that, hey, this is going to make me feel better. Then you have the ritual of care, just the act of seeing a doctor, getting that attention. And finally, there's the power of positive suggestion. All these psychological things create very real, very physical results. So when you put it all together, the placebo effect is maybe the most powerful, clearest example we have of the mind-body connection. It's living proof that our beliefs, our hopes, our expectations, they aren't just thoughts floating around in our heads. They are biological signals that can literally change our physical reality. And that really leaves us with one last, kind of mind-blowing thought. If our own minds already hold this incredible built-in power to heal, it just makes you wonder, right? What is the true potential of our belief?